Welcome to Mission Evolution Radio Show with Gwida Wiyaka, bringing together today's leading experts to uncover ever-deepening spiritual truths and the latest scientific developments in support of the evolution of humankind. For more information on Mission Evolution Radio with Gwida Wiyaka, visit www.missionevolution.org. And now, here's the host of Mission Evolution, Miss Gwida Wiyaka.
Humans are the only animals that desecrate their own nest. Our continual abuse of nature eloquently demonstrates this point. We're causing significant damage to the planet through our irresponsible treatment of her ecosystems. What's the solution? Can we repair this before it's too late? Mission Evolution Radio Show is coming to you around the world on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, xzbn.net. With us this hour to explore the concept of ecological narcissism and possible solutions is Jeanine M. Canty. Jeanine is a professor of transformative studies at California Institute of Integral Studies in San Francisco. Formerly the chair of environmental studies at Naropa University, she continues to guest teach at Naropa and at Pacifica Graduate Institute's Ecopsychology certification program. She's author of numerous books, her latest, Returning to the Self to Nature, Undoing Our Collective Narcissism and Healing Our Planet. You can find Jeanine at cedu/profiles/Jeanine-Canty. Jeanine, thank you for joining us on Mission Evolution.
Thank you for having me, Gwida. It's a pleasure.
It's always a pleasure to work with you, and I really love this topic. It's so important right now. Now, you're a professor of transformative studies. What are transformative studies?
Well, in particular, transformative studies looks at how adults can change their worldviews to be more resilient to whatever is at hand. And in the program that I teach in and the approach I take, it's also about bringing together multidisciplinary fields, so solving bigger problems of the world without specializing in just one field.
So what do you mean? Give me some examples, who you bring together.
For example, in my work, I straddle areas such as psychology, environmental issues, education, contemplative practice, so I don't situate in just one area.
Do you find that kind of gives you a triangulation on it, a deeper concept of the issue at hand?
Yeah, I do. I think we're programmed within our Western paradigms to kind of think very linearly and to use one frame. But as we become more comfortable with working with lots of different frames, we actually have the ability to see a lot more solutions and connect with a wider body of knowledge.
It seems like, over the years we got all segmented and segregated, and to the detriment of all the fields, really. Medicine and everything suffers from that, don't they?
Definitely. And I think that's part of our kind of cultural paradigm of being perfectionists and also wanting to be experts and really being able to control our narrative and know so deeply one area in particular. Often we're afraid to not know everything.
Doesn't that kind of, narrow a person's view?
Definitely, definitely. In some ways, we seem more confident because we know one area really well, but then there's so many different areas that we know nothing about. So yeah, it's really important to widen our understanding of so many different areas.
I would think that gives a larger translation point for people that specialize in different areas if they can start to branch out.
Definitely. And also understanding so many different types of people, different places, different perspectives, especially the origins of so many of these different fields, and then to really bring it all together to understand how best to approach various problems in our world.
Yeah, it's hugely important. So, what is ecopsychology?
Yeah, well, ecopsychology is really looking at how people, particularly people within Western cultures, and really anyone living under a corporate global paradigm, have how we've separated our psyches, our identities from Earth. And so we feel that we're separate from Earth instead of being animals, just as we are human animals, and how that's resulted both in the ecological crisis as well as the illness within the society of humans. And it really came to be in both looking at how the environmental movement was somewhat unaffected in being able to work with large groups of people because so many of its tactics used shaming and blaming. And so eco psychology really said, well, this movement needs some psychology. And then also saying, well, psychology is a field that's so individualized. It's something you just do in closed doors with you and your therapist. And psychology could actually use some environmental awareness to look at the bigger, like the largest problems that are facing humanity, and how some of our illnesses might not just be personal things, but are collective things.
It seems like the environmental movement ended up causing polarization rather than the action they were hoping for. What happened there? What's going on?
Yeah, and so many different dynamics. Off in the environmental movement, um, made an assumption that if people just had a lot of information about all of these damaging effects we're having on Earth, whether it's pollution or so many different things, that people would just respond without realizing that when people feel the overwhelm of what's really happening to Earth and how it's so human caused and the roles we play in that without even knowing, we shut down because there's so much guilt and shame and also not really knowing what to do. And so the environmental movement really wasn't looking at more of the emotional and psychological dimensions behind all of this.
Never underestimate the power of denial, right? So
Yeah.
doesn't it drive some people into just total denial? Oh, this is a bunch of tree huggers. This isn't true.
Yeah, yeah, and that's really the first stage of when we're looking at something that's beyond our comfort zone. Often we'll just fall right into denial, and it can be around environmental issues, but most of us have some sort of block in terms of areas that as soon as we are introduced to that, we're like, oh no, that doesn't exist, and I don't need to do that, and that's about those people over there, and it's not my issue, because we've gone past someone's edge of being effective, and also being comfortable. And the idea with transformative learning is you really just want to go just past someone's comfort zone rather than overshooting it so much that they shut down and jump into denial.
What about the industries that it is not in their financial best interest to acknowledge what's going on with the environment? How are they able to just kind of justify their stance?
Yeah, we're seeing that in such a massive scale right now. And that's part of the paradigm of corporate globalization and our Western paradigm. We've been so conditioned for hundreds and hundreds of years to always have more consumerism, more growth, bigger GDP, bigger profit. And so that's if that's our kind of guiding North Star, everything else gets shifted to not be as important. And so many of us have really been conditioned to believe this is true, that this is our goal in life. And for corporate entities who are made up of individuals that have paradigms and worldviews, this has been their overarching worldview, that we just always need to make more profit.
And at the expense of whatever else gets in the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty sad. So, what is Ecological justice.
Yeah, ecological justice looks at how various communities have less power to fight ecological injustice, and particularly how people of color and indigenous people and women and working class and poor people, as well as children and people with varying abilities, have less power to fight these issues because they have less time, less political resources to fight them. And so, with ecological justice, a classic example is that when a polluting corporation industry comes to someone's community, if the community is fairly affluent and has the resources to push harming industry out, they'll do this, but then it ends up going into someone else's community that doesn't have those resources, both economic, political, as well as just the time.
So it's, they're more, you're talking about the people that are really more in survival mode and don't have the extra anything to fight the corporations.
Exactly,
Okay.
exactly. And so many of the ecological issues are really bound up with social issues, justice issues, because the extraction of ecological resources, the resources of Earth, have always gone hand in hand with the extraction of human labor.
And what do you mean by that?
Yeah, sometimes we think of things like, people a lot of people get upset when topics such as racism come up, or even people that are comfortable talking about it think it's just about certain people not liking certain other people. But racism has really been used as a system of extracting labor. And so targeting folks that look a certain way or come in certain types of bodies or live in certain geographies to do the labor of extracting resources from the earth, whether they're mining, agriculture, all the real hard labor. And it's across so many different racial spectrums, but it's basically taking the resources, the human labor of the people who are at the bottom.
So that's kind of a judgment that these people are desperate enough to do these difficult jobs.
Yeah, in some ways, and in some ways, it goes back into the relationship that these people originally had as being earth-based peoples, whether they were, small farmers in Europe or in indigenous peoples in the Americas or
Well,
across the globe. Yeah.
we're going to have to take a station break. Jeanine and I will return very shortly, so don't you go away. This is Mission Evolution, www.missionevolution.org.
The end is come, the night has fallen. I have reached the end of days. What's real is not, reason fails me. I've gone beyond all known pathways. This is the end of reason. This is the end of time. I am alone, alone and broken. I am apart from what was mine.
Do we need to have our collective heads examined? With us this hour discussing the many facets of ecopsychology is Jeanine M. Canty, the author of Returning the Self to Nature, Undoing Our Collective Narcissism, and Healing Our Planet. Jeanine, what are some of the key theories of ecopsychology?
Oh yeah, there's so many. Some of the ones that I find most engaging is one is called the ecological self, and that's really looking at how, as people, when we spend time in nature, we can actually start to expand our sense of self. For example, if you're outside in your yard or at a park and you connect with a certain bird or a rabbit or a tree, suddenly you notice that you're having this little relationship. You're getting to know each other a little bit. Maybe you're chirping back and forth, or just staring at each other, or just sitting in the same space. And you suddenly realize that your wellness is bound up in theirs because you really care about them. And when we do that more and more, our boundaries of who we are actually expand. And so that's the ecological self. Another ecopsychology concept is arrested development. And that looks at how, since most of us haven't been raised in earth based traditions, we haven't had the rights that turn us into mature adults. So, most of the adults in our society, including our top leaders, our stars, our local leaders, most everyone is actually at the maturity level of a preteen or teenager.
That's scary. That's what's running the country, right?
Yeah, yeah, and it's something that's quite encouraged in many leadership positions. Another eco-psychology concept is the original trauma, and that comes from the work of psychotherapist Chalice Glendinning, along with some others. And that looks at when in our lineages did we break away from our earth based traditions and really lose that deep primal connection. And there's so many theories which talk about what that break is. And then a partnering theory to the original trauma is the primal matrix, which looks at what are our inherent birthrights in terms of our, if we were nature-based peoples, what would the dimensions of our connection with Earth look like?
Do you feel that that separation is part of why this narcissism is developed?
Yes, definitely. We've had such a progression of really being earth-based peoples where we have to be attuned to our larger landscapes as well as be members in a community that's dependent on surviving and collaboration to living in societies that are perceived, we're perceived as individuals, everyone's out for themselves, and that we have to constantly be in competition with one another, and we need to be better than others. And so we get addicted to ourselves because it's highly encouraged. And so that meme of narcissism is quite prevalent in our societies.
And of course, narcissism is a psychological diagnosis. It's not just, it's been passed around. The word right now is being bantered around and kind of used maybe sometimes irresponsibly. Have you been seeing that? And how would you define it in such a way that it fits with what we're doing with nature?
Yes, yes. Narcissism has become such a hot buzzword, and everyone's saying, "Oh, this person's a narcissist. This person's that." And as you say, narcissism is actually a psychological condition that's really hard to diagnose, and quite actually a small percentage of our population have what's called narcissistic personality disorder, or NPD. It's also known as extreme narcissism. Most of us don't fall into that, but narcissism as a collective disorder is something quite real and happening in our societies. And yeah, yes.
So who all's recognizing that?
Yeah. Well, I think when we talk about narcissism, there's a lot of theorists that talk about a narcissistic scale. And so all of us fall somewhere on that scale. Say it's from 1 to 10. We don't want to be a 1, which means we have very little ego and drive. But we don't want to be a 10, which makes us more on the extreme narcissism scale. We really want to be a 5 or a 6. But when we look at collective narcissism, it's looking at how our society's been shaped and structured to have everyone really hyper focused on themselves. And we see things like social media where most of us could spend our whole day promoting a story of ourselves to make us look really special. And so there's these traits from narcissistic personality disorder that have permeated our collective systems. And so many of us are following those areas. And yeah, it's interesting to look at the patterns of individual narcissism, which most of us are aware of, even if we don't pull them out. And it's this extreme sense of self, this arrogance that we're just so important. And in contrast to that, everyone else is really less important. And so narcissists and collective narcissism, where we have very little empathy for others and especially little empathy for what's going on with our ecological crisis. Another trait with that is just people thinking in the narcissism realm that it's always about other people doing things wrong. It's never about myself. So the sense of shamelessness. Yet underneath all of that, with narcissism, most of us are feeling really insecure, where feel we don't measure up to these grand expectations of our society. And so we're constantly trying to mask that. And so many of us have a hypersensitivity to critique. So yeah, that's a lot of the kind of painting out what the collective narcissism is.
So let's talk a little bit about the emotional bond between humans and the earth. What happened to it?
Yeah, and this parallels a lot in collective narcissism, which one thing that really got me into looking at narcissism was when we're hearing all these buzzwords about narcissists and how many people just don't like them. It makes you wonder what happened to a narcissist to become that way. And so much of it is their faulty parenting with their, their father, their mother, or whoever their primary caregiver was, and the damage that they have in that. And with collective narcissism and breaking away from our earth traditions, in most earth-based or many earth-based traditions, our primary caregiver is Mother Earth, and we've broken our connection with Mother Earth and instead really pledged our allegiance, our loyalty, or our worldviews to this global corporate paternal reality. So we're looking outward into more industrial, technical, um, comp- competitive systems rather than really getting back to our relationships with our metaphoric mother, the earth, the planet that we would not even be alive if it wasn't
Without her,
for.
yeah.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
so Janine, do you see us as being in a climate crisis right now?
Oh, most certainly. Yes. I mean, I'm witnessed from the decades I've been alive, so many changes, and I definitely pay attention to so much of the science behind it. But just even living in the communities and seeing so many extreme floods, extreme droughts where I live, so many fires, and just looking at all the devastation to so many animals and water systems. And yeah, we can't, it's pretty hard to deny the climate crisis.
Well, but a lot of people would say, yes, but Earth goes through these cycles and we're just in another cycle here.
Yeah, and I think the difference with this cycle is that it's a human caused cycle where we have so much agency to not have all of these changes if we actually changed our lifestyles to be more aligned with the resources of Earth and the living systems of Earth. So we're basically destroying our own home, which is pretty abusive behavior.
Yeah. So when we're dealing with this, what proof do we have that it's um, not just a cycle of the Earth versus human cause? Do we have studies and whatnot that prove completely that that's the case?
Oh yeah, there's, and that's not my area of expertise, but something that I read a lot about. But there's no shortage of research, published articles, climate change scientists, data from communities. There's just so much information out there. But then again, when we were talking earlier, information alone doesn't change the way people choose to show up to these issues.
Yeah, showing up is the key there, isn't it?
Yes.
So there are a lot of people, complaining and protesting and trying to be visible about it. But it seems it's pretty frustrating. It seems that they're not being heard. Have you seen that as the case?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I reside in the US, and we're definitely experiencing a period of time where so many of the environmental protections and progresses over the last decades are
Well,
being
I'm
rolled
sorry.
back.
We're going to have to take another
Oh,
station break. Janine and I will be right back to continue our discussion. You stay right there. This is Mission Evolution, missionevolution.org.
One people, one nation, searching for the light. One people, one nation, coming from the stars. One people, one nation, to heal this earth of ours. I've been broken, shattered, cast to the wind. I am scattered upon the wind. I've been broken, shattered, cast to the wind. I am scattered upon the wind. I've been broken, shattered, cast to the wind. I am scattered upon the wind. Makaina, 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 Makaina.
Don't we all need to live here? This is Mission Evolution, missionevolution.org. With us discussing the climate crisis is Jeanine M. Canty. You can find Jeanine at ciis.edu/profiles/Jeanine-Canty. Jeanine, it's not as if we can live without the planet. So why are some so unmotivated to change the behaviors that are threatening her?
I think we've focused so much on the problems of what we're doing to the planet without having a story that shows everyone how they can actually thrive in systems that are non-harming. So people are fearful because they feel like they're going to lose things, that they're going to lose money, the way of lifestyle that they've really come accustomed to with so many things, or just not realizing that there's other ways of being that actually address a much deeper relationship, both within to Earth, but also within our human communities that can be quite fulfilling. But
Well,
change is so scary.
I would argue that it's our very lifestyles that are causing so much illness and isolation and depression on the planet.
Definitely,
Yeah.
definitely.
How can we present the idea of becoming more ecologically sound in such a way that people find it attractive?
Yeah. Well, I think giving people more agency in being part of the solution, rather having it something done to them, where they can see within their own communities, within their own workplaces, the type of work they choose to do, and really looking at their ecosystems, that there's actually things that are harming our communities and ways to mitigate this in manners that don't mean they have to overhaul everything about their life, but there's small steps and bigger steps.
So, what would the first small steps be to start to turn a community around?
Yeah, I'm a huge proponent of localization, of really knowing what's going on in the communities that we reside in, and also knowing what the resources and the needs are here. So I think learning how to reside in our communities and seeing what are the actual needs. So many of us are doing employment that is bringing in resources from so far away, or giving resources to places so far away. And when we start to attend to like what is actually going on with the people and the bioregion, the waters, the trees, all of the resources and life around us, we start to have a more intimate view of what's going on and what's needed.
It sounds like you're advocating going back to where we were maybe a couple hundred years ago, where the communities they had their agriculture, they had their gardens, they didn't ship all over the place. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, in a certain way, I definitely believe in greening our communities and supporting local businesses, supporting neighbors, and at the same time still having global institutions and systems that are supportive, but not investing in fully just in global systems. So I would say a mixture. Uh, when we can reduce the amount of fossil fuels we're using and transporting things to our communities, and also away from our communities and other types of resources, we really invest in place and can really have more thriving communities and feel a deeper sense of connection. Because as we were talking a little bit too, there's such a crisis of individualism where so many people feel disconnected not only from earth but from one another, and there's so many people experiencing loneliness and depression and forms of despair and suffering that aren't needed, in ways that there's so many folks that are here and wanting to connect with one another, and when we can do it on a community level, it really changes so much.
Hasn't the situation that I think most countries are in is the government has gotten so large and overlording such a large area. How is that affecting the whole picture?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I really get excited about the idea of more of participatory democracy, where a true democratic system really can't be more than about 500 people So many of our nations, we, say we have these voting privileges and we're, politically pre-industrious systems, yet we're really choosing between like two choices, binary without many real agency, but more participatory democracy is where most people in the community actually have influence and they have leverage points where they can really have direct connection with political leaders and with institutions. So we really have proactive choices and can shape what's going on and participate in what's going on.
Do you think the binary system has set us up for polarization and propaganda?
So much so. Yeah, I get um, yeah, very heated about that topic, and as we all should. But we get conditioned to think that it's us and them, that it's black and white, red and blue, male, female, owning class, poor, rather than seeing that. It's in all of our best interests to be cooperating with one another, and no one really wants to other different people. So much of that is fear-based, and it's actually when we create polarization between people, it's quite profitable, because then we can sort people into roles of lesser. Again, what we were talking about earlier, often sorting people into poor and working class, where they have to do those jobs that no one wants to for less pay. And it's a great way to divide us politically and economically, when most of us have very deep common interests.
But wouldn't it be make sense that the deep common interest should be saving the planet that we live on?
Yes, saving the planet that we live on and saving ourselves too. Uh, yes, that's so important. And when we look at the kind of bigger eagle vision of the generations to come and what's going to happen, it's, I think, easier to participate in that. Yet in the present times, we get so much news and social media and just propaganda to keep us separate, and it's those people over here and we're right and they're wrong. No matter what your kind of political and worldview beliefs are, no one's fully right, no one's fully wrong. And if we actually stop subscribing to having kind of enemies or opposites, those people over there, we can actually tap into our communities and realize that we do have common interests, just even in the places that we live in. We want to live in places that are well protected, preserved, have ample resources and opportunities, and where we feel relatively safe and live amongst people that we can count on. And it doesn't matter what their political beliefs are. And it's actually really healthy to have lots of diverse worldviews living in harmony together.
Where I live, I'm kind of in the middle of nowhere, and there's a lot of space between myself and our neighbors. And yet, surprisingly, we're all very close and very supportive of one another. If I get in trouble here, I live by myself. It's just a phone call away, and one of my neighbors will come dashing over to help. We don't see that when people are living on top of each other. What's going on there?
Yeah, and I think um, often when we talk about community, there's not necessarily a project of what the community is for. And so, in really high, dense areas, and sometimes in rural areas, this can happen as well, there's no real project. And so, there needs to be understanding of what a neighborhood, a community is about. What you're talking about in your community, I've had tastes of that living in the foothills of Boulder, where our community is always hyper vigilant about fire protection. And so we know where our keys are to each other's houses and the names of pets, because we're always ready for any sort of emergency that might happen. And it creates more care and understanding, because there's a bigger threats out there that we want to make sure everyone's safe. And I think when we get to cities and more densely populated areas, there's not that much commonality presented, because everyone's so individualized. There's less people that have the privilege to own homes, and people are just kind of going to work and not really connecting with one another in their neighborhoods. But that's not always true, because there's lots of communities, when we were talking about ecological justice before, that get together around common issues, whether it's having clean water, or safe neighborhoods, or urban gardens, or whatever it may be. There's more and more highly dense communities really coming together.
Well, it's time for us to take another station break. Please stay with us as Jeanine and I continue to explore the future of our planet. This is Mission Evolution, www.missionevolution.org.
Searching for the light. One people, one nation, coming from the stars. Brilliant feathers of an unearthly hue glide by on the edge of his dream. A whisper of touch, an unheard song. Rose bird takes flight, prompted by his broken heart. Fly high, sweet phoenix, even though you are free. So above my broken life, bring your healing tears to me. Fly high, sweet phoenix, let your flame burn ever bright. Come lead this fallen warrior through his darkest night.
Is there an adult present? This is Mission Evolution, missionevolution.org. We're continuing our discussion with Jeanine M. Canty. You can find Jeanine at ciis.edu/profiles/Jeanine-Canty. Jeanine, let's go back a little bit and talk about the rites of passage, because you mentioned that, people leading things and making the decisions are kind of like teenagers, because they haven't gone through these rites of passage. Would you go into that a little deeper for us, please?
Sure, sure, yes. With that idea of arrested development, where most people in our current societies are really at the maturity level of teenagers, and it relates with ecopsychology, really holds the awareness that, or the assumption that, most people within our societies are actually ill and traumatized, that by being separate from nature, we're really deeply um, in pain and suffering. And that maturity comes traditionally through earth-based rites of passage, that most earth-based societies all over the world had all sorts of traditions of raising youth in nature, and really learning how to connect not only to our bioregions, the waters, the air, the fire, all of the trees and plants of a community, but also to the spirit. And that can be a loosely held term depending on what one would believe. But I definitely get into the kind of bioregional metaphors and literal sense of what it means to maybe be a mountain person. I live in Colorado, lots of mountains and rivers, or what it means to, if you live in more of a hot desert climate, or an ocean person, and really being so deeply connected to these places and all of the various bioregions, depending on what the what is actually there, and the life of the system have different forms of what's spiritual, and also different forms of how one survives within a community, within the different systems. So
Well, we we have graduations. In fact, now you graduate from preschool, okay, but then there's high school graduation, college graduation, getting married, coming of age. We do kind of landmark those. How does that differ from what you're talking about with the more indigenous rites of passage?
yeah, because those rites of passage, while super important for our Western society, are often markers of being more of an adult in terms of the standard of achieving more and having more notoriety and, again, specialization. Often I get inspired by the work of Malidome Some. He talks about how for Western peoples, often our rites of passage are all of the things that break us and crack open our awareness that, oh, there's something we're missing. And so those rites of passage are more of things of divorce, or the death of a loved one, or a near-death experience, coming out, breaking away from a religious tradition. There's so many, just having a spiritual awakening. And those are the things that open these kind of doorways into, oh, there's so much going on in this lifetime and lifetimes, rather than just getting a really big paycheck, good job, and having excellent housing.
So you're talking about the dark night of the soul being a rite of passage.
Exactly, exactly. And our current society often wants us to be so safe and protected and standardized that we don't even know how to fall into these dark nights of the soul, where we might glean some much deeper wisdom. And we also have so much fear around having true heartbreak and emotions and loss. That's kind of antithetical to a society that wants more and more and bigger and more joys and success.
Well, I can certainly see the fear. We have no support if we're all separate. So if we go through one of these dark nights, we're kind of hanging in the wind. And speaking of wisdom, what's happened to honoring the elders? What's happened to valuing the wisdom of the years?
Yeah, that's such a huge, huge issue in our societies, where we, uh, when we're narcissistic, and when we're always looking to bigger, better, greater, better looking, we are also addicted to eternal youth and always wanting to look overly healthy and young, and really stuck in that arrested development framing, that we fear the elderly. We're also so individualistic that it's hard to actually open to any wisdom from others, especially our elders, and we've lost that sense of respect. And so often we are missing so much wisdom, and so many indigenous earth-based cultures to become old and to be big, full-bodied and wrinkly was like the greatest achievement. And now we have such fear of aging, of sickness and death that we lock away our elders and dismiss their wisdom in such a way that it's just quite painful. And we're missing so much opportunity for intergenerational wisdom.
Don't you think that the elders are also deteriorating as a result?
Definitely, most definitely. Um, I think the whole idea of retirement, well, it's great to retire from a career where you have to do the 9 to 5, 50 weeks a year. Often, when people get to a certain age, we don't look at the wisdom and the work they still have to do as elders. And so when people really stop being able to share their innate gifts that they were born into this world to give, we start to deteriorate. And often we're also, I think the elders are, being plopped in front of televisions and being, sedated with all
Yeah.
sorts of prescriptions. Yeah.
Generally surplused, right?
Yes,
Yeah. So
yes.
so it seems maybe we're kind of all set in our way in this narcissistic society. How can we prepare our children to be part of the solution?
Oh,
What can we
yeah.
change for our children so that they aren't stuck in the same isolation that we are?
Definitely. And I would say it's children, but it's also going back to transformative learning. It's adults of any age. We can all change. And there's all sorts of um, ways to do this. The first is so much of what we've been doing in our time together today is unraveling the issues, just waking up to what's going on in the world and acknowledging our own roles in it, and also our collective entrenchment within all of these systems, and just coming to like acceptance that this is actually a thing that we might want to turn our attention to. And then from there, for so many of us, it brings up a lot of emotions. And we want to actually work with the feeling dimensions of ourselves and collectively, so we don't just fall into that denial and defense stages. We want to actually attend to all of these emotions. And sometimes it will bring up deep levels of despair when we see what's happening to the planet and to all of the animals and just ecosystems, and to the youth and the all peoples. And so being able to feel despair, sadness, for so many of us, it's to feel rage and anger about things. And for a lot of us too, just the apathy that's involved because we don't feel like we have the power to make change, but to really let our emotions come into our bodies, to feel our bodies, and to kind of be a full person rather than just stuck in our heads and denying so many issues. Another piece with that is to actually attend to the care of ourselves in a way that we haven't in our histories, and with children and with people of any age, really. Oh, yes.
We're about out of time, and I would be remiss if I didn't ask you, Janine, what's your mission?
Oh, yes. I would say it's to bring greater well-being to all sentient beings by reconnecting people, particularly people within Western cultures, to nature-centered and transpersonal paradigms.
That's pretty worthwhile. How's it going?
I feel like it's going well, and that there's so much pain in the world, yet there's so many people that are seeking to make changes, seeking a deeper, richer life, and to serve and be in community with other people and with Earth. I'm hopeful.
Well, that's a good note to end on. But unfortunately, we're out of time. Janine, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Oh, my pleasure, and thank you for the work you're doing.
Thank you. Our guest this hour has been Jeanine M. Canty, the author of Returning the Self to Nature, Undoing Our Collective Narcissism and Healing Our Planet. To find out more about Jeanine, where you can find her books and all she has to offer, visit ciis.edu/profiles/Jeanine-Canty. This has been Mission Evolution with Gwida Wiyaka. For more information or to enjoy our past archived episodes, you can visit our website, www.missionevolution.org. But please be sure to join us right here next time on the X Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net, where this mission will continue, bringing information, resources, and support to an evolving world.